Artificial, natural, zero sugar. When it comes to sweeteners, the confusion is just real. We're always being told to cut back on sugar, but what are we actually supposed to replace it with? In this explainer, we're going to cut through all that noise and build a simple, science-backed way to make better choices.
We have all been there, right? You're standing in an aisle, just staring at this wall of drinks, trying to figure out what the right choice is. Should you grab the full sugar classic, or maybe the diet version? What about that new natural drink that's sweetened with monk fruit? Honestly, it can feel like a totally impossible decision.
And look, it's not your fault that you're confused. The scientific evidence itself often seems to point in completely opposite directions. So our goal today is to sort through all of that evidence and build a simple framework you can actually use, every single day.
To figure out the best solution, we first have to agree on what the problem is. And, in the world of nutrition, there are very few things that are clearer than the health risks of sugary drinks.
The evidence here is just overwhelming and frankly pretty scary. We're talking about direct links to a whole host of chronic diseases. And what's absolutely crucial to understand is this dose-response relationship. So what does that mean? It means it's not an all-or-nothing game. The more of this stuff you drink, the higher your risk climbs for things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even early death.
So if sugary drinks are the big problem, then the logical next step is just to find an alternative, right? Well, this is where low and no-calorie sweeteners come into the picture, promising all of the sweetness with none of the sugar.
The scientific term for these is low or no-calorie sweetened beverages, or LNCSBs for short, but you and I know them as diet drinks. This is a huge category, and it covers everything from sodas with artificial sweeteners like aspartame, all the way to drinks using so-called natural ones like stevia.
And at first glance, the science looks really good. The highest quality studies, the ones we call randomized controlled trials, they show that when people swap their sugary drinks for these diet versions, they actually see small but very real reductions in their body weight and body fat.
But this is exactly where that simple story ends and all the confusion really begins. Because when you start to look at different kinds of evidence, you get very, very different pictures of what's actually going on.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is really the absolute core of the confusion. On one side, you have these short-term, tightly controlled experiments where diet drinks seem harmless, basically no different than water. But on the other side, you have these long-term studies that just observe people's habits, and they find a link between drinking a lot of diet drinks and a higher risk of disease. So, what is going on here? How can both of these things be true?
Well, one major theory is something called reverse causation. What scientists worry about is that these long-term studies might be getting the cause and effect totally backward. Just think about it for a second. Who is most likely to start drinking diet soda? It's often people who are already worried about their weight, or maybe they've been told by their doctor to cut back on sugar. See, in that case, the diet drink isn't causing the health problem. The pre-existing health problem is causing the person to choose the diet drink. Now, all this confusion leads a lot of people to think, okay, fine, I'll just avoid all that artificial stuff and I'll stick to natural sweeteners like stevia. But are they really a guaranteed healthier choice? This is such a crucial point. The word natural on a food label is not a synonym for healthy. These sweeteners, even if they come from plants, are still highly processed compounds and they have real effects on our bodies. The evidence here is still coming in and it's often mixed. Some studies suggest they might affect our gut bacteria or how our bodies process glucose, and we simply don't have decades of long-term data on them like we do for other sweeteners. They're just not a magic bullet.
Okay, so things are clearly complicated. To cut through all this confusion, we're going to use a simple visual tool to organize all this evidence into a really clear hierarchy.
We're going to call it an evidence-based beverage ladder. Just think of it like a hierarchy, ranking drinks from the absolute best for your health all the way down to the ones you should definitely try to avoid.
And here it is, the beverage ladder. Up at the very top, you've got the clear winners: water, coffee, and tea. No big surprises there. But now look at the bottom half. Notice that 100% fruit juice is ranked way down on the bottom rung, right there next to soda, because its sugar impact is pretty similar. And here's the key takeaway for diet drinks. They're in the lower tier. They are for sure a step up from sugary drinks, but the evidence suggests they're best used as a temporary tool to get off sugar, not as a permanent healthy habit. So, this ladder is great for understanding the hierarchy, but how do we actually turn this into simple, actionable rules for our daily lives?
Well, here's the playbook. Make water, coffee, and tea your foundation. Be absolutely ruthless about cutting out those sugary drinks. And here's maybe the most important rule of all. Use diet drinks as a temporary bridge to get away from sugar, not as your final destination. Because ultimately, it's not about one single drink. It's about your overall pattern, day in and day out. That consistency is what really matters most.
And this brings us to a final, maybe bigger idea. Maybe the goal isn't really to find the perfect artificial sweetener. Maybe it's to slowly retrain our taste buds to desire less intense sweetness in the first place. So we'll leave you with this question. What's just one small step you can take, starting today, to move in that direction? That's all for this Explain.